what's your favorite aspect of the game right now? What are you most looking forward to seeing?
I think there's two things. First is the exploration. I'm a big explorer, and going through a high fantasy world and just finding all these crazy places is really appealing. And then the other one is our combat system. I'm kind of sick of this click combat that we've seen in MMOs recently. Our system is a lot more tactical. You're making decisions, you're responding to events, and I'm looking forward to both.
Yeah, you seem to be really passionate about the challenging gameplay in this new MMO. Why do you think the rest of the industry is moving away from that, and why are you moving towards it?
Well, I think a lot of the MMOs that have been made more recently especially, they seem to be trying to appeal to all people at all the time. They're trying to make it mass market. And but what happens there is you'll have features in the game that some players will like and other players won't. And so what we're doing that's the opposite really is making a targeted MMO. We're identifying our audience. Players that want more of a challenge, want that risk versus reward, want to have to master things and work for things, and getting a sense of accomplishment. So by appealing to a smaller, more targeted audience, we don't have to spend huge dollars. We don't have to worry about making everybody happy. We can focus on making a really great game for that specific group.
Now, how will you be funding this game to completion?
Well, the first round of funding, obviously, is Kickstarter. We may need more funding later, and we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
What operating systems do you plan to support?
Well, the game will be a Windows game. That majority of gamers have Windows machines. But we also like other operating systems, and given the chance, probably after launch, we'd be happy to look into supporting those.
So the MMO audience today seems extremely critical and lacking much tolerance. Are you terrified to release a new game and throw it to the wolves, so to speak?
Actually, not at all, because I think this comes back to the idea of creating a game for the mass appeal or a target audience. If you're trying to appease everybody, you ought to be pretty nervous because that's virtually impossible. We've identified a target audience, and we're making a game that we want to play, that we know that this audience wants to play, and we're pretty darn confident that we'll enjoy it and they'll enjoy it.
So when you say this game will be more challenging, even more difficult, what exactly do you mean? Are we looking at old school corpse runs where players can steal your loot?
No, we're not looking at corpse runs and big penalties and punishing you and making you have to grind and do tedious repetitive things. That's not what we mean by difficult. That's tedious, not difficult. Difficult means that you encounter a challenge, that you've got to think through, that you've got to plan along with your group, and hopefully, even if you fail that encounter a couple times, eventually you're victorious and you feel great about it, you get a sense of accomplishment. That's what we mean by challenging.
So will there be raids? And if so, what do you see as the ideal length of time for a raid? And should raids be able to be beaten by pickup groups or only coordinated teams?
The way we're looking at it is, the idea of a group and a raid, we're kind of merging that together. There'll be areas that are designed for 8 people, maybe an area designed for 14, 16, 20, what have you. But there's not just going to be this. It's a group area. It's a raid area. As far as pickup groups or pickup raids, there'll be the opportunity to do that. But certainly, a group of people that work together and play together often within our game are going to, they're going to do the best when they're adventuring through these areas.
So when you're saying group areas and raid areas, is that implying that these raids are going to be outdoor open world raids?
There'll be some outdoor or even in a dungeon, but they're still considered open world because other players can be there. But then we are also going to use instancing to some degree if we have a dungeon or an area that's a little bit more linear that tells a story, and that that will be just including you and your group.
How big will the game world be at launch?
It's really hard with an MMO to say really, are you doing it in acres or square miles? So it's really hard to say how big it's going to be. So our answer really is it's going to be big.
Will races have any impact beyond cosmetic?
Yeah, we think that that different races will have some different abilities, innate abilities, different stats. Some plus, some minus, because we do want you actually to do better or worse in certain areas depending on the race that you chose, your class, etc. We want them to have meaning.
Can we expect open dungeons or instances? This one is really big for me personally. I hate instances. I think they ruin community building.
I agree to some extent that you don't want a completely instance game because it does interfere with community. What we've chosen to do is create an open world, overland as well as dungeons, but also a group of dungeons that will be instance because that allows us to tell us more of a linear story. So really, it's going to be both. Where it makes sense that it's open, it'll be open. In some cases, then it'll be instance-based. There's really pluses and minuses to both, and we wouldn't want to, not have one and only have the other because that would limit us in ways that we don't want to be limited by.
I really miss the danger associated with exploration and traveling. Griffins in West Commonland, sand giants in Oasis, hill giants, cyclops, etc. Getting stomped by these things as a weakling, but then coming back months or years later and laying waste to them was a great feeling. So I guess my question is, will the danger and excitement of exploration and traveling in EverQuest be present, and will race play a factor in that?
I don't know if race will play a factor, but definitely that feeling will exist. If you're careful and you're traveling and you're staying on a path, you're near guards or what have you, you may be relatively safe. But if you do just start heading out in one direction and exploring, it's very possible that you could come across an area that was higher level, and you may die, and you may hopefully return there in the future and get some revenge.
So will the world be zoned or instanced?
At this point, the plan is to be zoned. There are pluses and minuses to both. We've done both with EverQuest and Vanguard. Pantheon will be zone-based, which gives us a lot more flexibility in terms of different environments. It allows us to build environments more quickly, and so that's the direction we're going to head with Pantheon.
Will combat be more traditional, like Vanguard, EQOA, EQ, or action-oriented, like newer MMOs?
It's actually kind of a hybrid of both. We like the tactical, slower combat where you're thinking through things. We definitely don't want to make Twitch combat. But we also do like a lot of the new RPGs that are coming out where you can actually, during combat, you can kind of see tells from the mob. You can see where an area of effect spell might go off. You can see a cone where the guy might be swinging a broadsword. And then by seeing that, having that be a tell, you can then move to avoid it. So we want a combination of reactive and active combat, where you're responding and counterspelling and deflecting things, much like an earlier MMO. But we also want that kind of a little bit faster paced environment where you can actually react to what the players are going or what the NPCs are going to do.
So with counterspelling and reacting to them, is that a matter of activating an ability, or how do you choose to react to what you see them doing?
Well, there'll be passive and then active abilities. Passive abilities you'll set up before combat, stuff like dual wielding or a double attack or a riposte. But then in combat, you'll have different abilities and spells. And the big thing is that all of those abilities and spells are not just offensive. They're not just about how you're attacking the enemy. It's about reacting and having an answer to what the enemy's doing. So again, you'll see where the guy's going to swing a sword. Maybe you can get out of the way. Maybe you'll see another wizard about to cast a fireball, and so you instead of casting something at that time yourself, you wait till the right time, and then you can deflect that fireball maybe back on another one of the enemy.
How will we target enemies or allies? Do we use tab, or is it freeform?
Probably tab. It's a UI situation, and we hope to have a UI that's customizable. But one thing that we will have is, in addition to the ability to tab through, we are going to have a defensive and offensive target, which we think is really strong. It worked well with one of our last games, and that allows you to decide, I'm attacking this mob over here, but I'm also protecting my friend who's a player over here, and they're both targeted. And then when you cast a spell, this the game knows, is this something that's like a healing spell that should go to my defensive target, or is this an offensive spell that should go to my offensive target?